So we're taking a deep dive today into the future of design and culture. You've probably seen the buzz around events like ComplexCon, that huge mashup of streetwear music and limited edition, well, everything.
Well,
Really makes a statement, doesn't it? We have that New York Times piece on it, pretty clear it's a cultural force. But the question is it a sign of things to come or just a flash in the pan?
that's the million-dollar question, and that's precisely where Scenario DNA's trend report Post-Hype Design Futures enters the scene. We're going to unpack the scenarios they've laid out for what comes after the hype. We'll use ComplexCon as a reference point and see what it might mean for you personally.
This idea of the duality of spectacle jumps out. What exactly does scenario DNA mean by that?
We'll think of it this way. Events like ComplexCon reel you in with that promise of exclusivity. But beneath the surface, they might be masking some deeper problems, like, the possibility exploitation in how things are made, the environmental cost of fast fashion, and the psychological effects of always chasing the next big thing. That's the shadow side lurking behind the glitz and glamour.
And scenario DNA uses these archetypes, the hero, the seeker, and the shadow, to break this down.
Exactly. The celebrities and influencers fueling these trends, they embody the hero. They've got the access, the products, the cultural clout. Then you've got the seeker, the person attending who wants a piece of that hero's world. They're after the limited edition items and that feeling of belonging to something exclusive. And then there's the shadow. It represents the potential downsides, like overconsumption being manipulated and focusing on superficial status instead of genuine connection.
The New York Times piece mentioned how some people saw ComplexCon as just a big, noisy spectacle, cashing in on fleeting trends.
That's where that shadow archetype kicks in. What happens when the hype dies down? What's the real lasting value of these experiences and the items people are clamoring for? These are questions we need to think about as we navigate a world that's increasingly driven by hype. Now let's dig into the futures that Scenario DNA proposes.
Their first scenario is meaningful engagement. It suggests we're going to shift from short-term hype to something with long-term value.
Imagine memory mapping museums where you can interact with these digital archives and actually weave your own stories into historical events. Or picture AI-driven art installations that respond to your emotions, creating a completely unique experience just for you.
So instead of just passively taking it all in, we're actively shaping the experience. It's a total contrast to those static exhibitions.
This is driven by a desire for something authentic, something with depth, but it also raises the issue of burnout culture. Could this constant engagement turn into an obligation instead of a choice?
It's like comparing a sugar rush to a nourishing meal. One is fleeting, the other sustains you. Are there any real-world examples of this meaningful engagement happening now?
Absolutely. The Museum of Broken Relationships is a great example. People share objects and stories of heartbreak, creating this deeply personal collective experience. Then there's James Turrell's Rodin Crater. It's a work of art decades in the making, transforming a volcanic crater into an observatory focused on the sky. And the Tate Exchange in London, it turns the museum into a platform for collaborative art and dialogue. All of these demonstrate how design can create opportunities for deeper connections and reflection.
The second scenario, sustainable scarcity, reimagines exclusivity with sustainability and accessibility at the forefront.
Think about the rise of eco-minimalists. They value having fewer items, but they're high quality and ethically produced. Or the upcyclers. They're all about transforming discarded materials into something unique and creative. Limited edition items made from sustainable or upcycled materials could really resonate with people who care about both exclusivity and conscious consumption.
But the report also points out resource hoarding as a potential shadow side to this scenario.
You're right. The demand for these sustainable materials could lead to those resources being controlled by a select few, which puts smaller creators at a disadvantage. It's vital to ensure that sustainability doesn't just become another barrier to entry, another form of exclusivity.
Are there any examples of this sustainable scarcity in action right now?
Patagonia's Worn Wear program is a great one. They encourage repair and reuse over buying new things. Then you have Vegea. They make vegan leather from grape waste for luxury items. And Bloom Foam. They use algae as a sustainable alternative to those petroleum-based foams. We see it in everything, from shoes to furniture. They all demonstrate how sustainability and luxury can exist side by side.
The third scenario, customization as standard, suggests a shift from mass production to a highly personalized approach.
We see hints of this in subcultures already, like the sneakerheads who customize shoes for personal expression, or the modders who tweak their tech to fit their needs. AI and machine learning could make on-demand customization accessible to everyone.
So we move away from buying off the rack to having things designed for our specific needs and preferences.
Exactly. Imagine designing your own clothes with services like Converse by You. Stitch Fix uses AI and stylists to put together wardrobes based on your style, and IKEA with their IKEA XU initiative. They're letting people customize furniture. These all show the potential for personalization to take center stage.
But what about the potential for excessive waste, as the report calls it?
That's a valid concern. This increased focus on customization could lead to a surge of highly specific products that are only used for a short time. Finding a balance between this desire for personalized things and sustainable practices is going to be essential.
The fourth scenario, decentralized and localized trends, points to a move away from those global celebrity-driven trends.
It's about looking closer to home. Think about locavore movements that prioritize locally sourced goods, or the rise of regional streetwear brands that embody local identities. We're also seeing a resurgence of artisan guilds connecting people with their regional heritage.
So instead of always looking up to the same global icons, we're finding inspiration within our own communities. What role does technology play in all of this?
It's a major factor. Digital marketplaces like Etsy allow local creators to reach a global audience. Social media connects people who share similar interests no matter where they are. But the report also raises the issue of fragmentation without support. With these decentralized models, creators could end up isolated and lacking the resources they need to thrive.
So how do we ensure that these local creators have the support to be successful?
Platforms like StockX are doing some interesting things. They have regional limited edition drops. Then you have events like the Brooklyn Flea Market. It celebrates local vendors and the unique things they create. Bridging the gap between local creativity and wider audiences is crucial.
The fifth scenario, ethical and transparent, reimagines hype culture with an emphasis on ethical production.
It's about holding brands accountable. Fair trade advocates, people in the slow fashion movement, and activist consumers are leading the charge. They're demanding fair labor practices, sustainable sourcing, and transparency throughout the entire supply chain.
So consumers are becoming more aware and demanding that their values align with the things they buy.
Absolutely. Technology is making this easier with blockchain. It allows us to track products and verify ethical claims, and AI is helping people make informed choices about a product's environmental and ethical impact.
It makes it much easier for consumers to support brands that reflect their values. Are there any brands embracing this approach already?
Everlane is a great example. They have this radical transparency policy where they share detailed information about their production process. Allbirds is another one. They're very open about their carbon footprint, and they actively offset their emissions. And then you have the Who Made My Clothes campaign. They're pushing for transparency throughout the supply chain. All of these show that transparency can build trust and loyalty with customers.
But the report also mentions the risk of consumer guilt being exploited.
It's a real danger. Brands could try to manipulate emotions to push products without actually making substantial changes. Consumers need to be savvy about this. They need to look beyond the marketing and make sure there's a genuine commitment to ethical practices.
The sixth scenario is virtual integration. This is about the increasing role of digital experiences in our lives.
We're seeing it with metaverse enthusiasts who are immersed in these virtual worlds. They're acquiring digital assets for their avatars. Crypto natives are using blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And digital creators are pushing the boundaries of virtual fashion and experiences.
So it's about blurring the lines between the physical and the virtual, creating new avenues for creativity and ownership.
Exactly. AR and VR are creating more immersive virtual environments. Blockchain is enabling digital ownership like NFTs. It has the potential to reduce our reliance on physical goods, which could lessen our environmental impact.
What are some real-world examples of this virtual integration in action?
The Fabricant is one. It's a digital fashion house creating clothing specifically for the digital world. Luxury brands like Balenciaga have designed digital skins for games like Fortnite, and RTFKT Studios is making NFT sneakers that exist both digitally and physically. This is really just the beginning.
The report also highlights the risk of replicating existing inequalities in the digital realm.
That's a critical point. Access to technology and digital literacy could create new barriers. It's essential that we design the virtual world to be inclusive and accessible so we don't end up with a digital divide.
The seventh scenario is anti-hype and cultural integrity. It's a counter-movement to that hype-driven culture we were talking about.
It's about valuing authenticity, timelessness, and understanding the cultural influences behind things. The slow fashion designers focus on quality over quantity. Indie musicians and artists prioritize authenticity, and cultural preservationists are working to protect traditional crafts.
It sounds like a yearning for something more substantial and enduring than trends that come and go. What's driving this shift?
People are becoming more aware of the environmental impact of fast fashion. There's a growing fatigue with the constant pressure to keep up with the latest thing. And there's a renewed appreciation for craftsmanship and quality.
Are there any real-world examples of this anti-hype movement taking shape?
The Slow Factory Foundation is doing great work. They promote thoughtful consumption through education and collaborations. 100 Thieves, a streetwear brand, has embraced these minimalist drops. They focus on quality over hype. And Phoebe Philo's new label is all about timeless and elegant designs. These examples show that there's definitely a market for things that are built to last.
The report mentions the risk of elitism within this scenario.
That's a valid concern. These anti-hype movements could become very exclusive, catering only to people who can afford these high-quality goods. Finding ways to make these values accessible to everyone is important.
The eighth scenario, inclusive and accessible, is all about creating experiences that are accessible to everyone.
It's about challenging the traditional notions of exclusivity. Disability advocates are pushing for universal design principles. They want spaces and products to be usable by people with a wide range of abilities.
So it's about moving beyond just making accommodations to creating something that's inherently inclusive.
Right. The body positivity movement is challenging those narrow beauty standards. They're promoting acceptance and diversity, and intersectional feminists are addressing those interconnected systems of oppression that impact people across different identities.
It's about working towards a more equitable and just world where everyone can thrive. What's driving this push for inclusivity?
There's a growing awareness of the systemic barriers and discrimination that exist. People are demanding diversity, and there's a growing understanding that inclusivity isn't just ethical, it's good for business, too.
Are there any real-world examples of this inclusive and accessible approach being put into practice?
Adidas has their adaptive apparel line. It's designed specifically for people with disabilities. They use features like easy open closures and sensory-friendly fabrics. Ivy Park promotes body acceptance and diversity through inclusive sizing and representation. And the Era app provides visual interpretation services for people who are blind or visually impaired.
These are all great examples. They show that inclusivity can lead to innovative solutions and create better experiences for everyone.
But the report points out the risk of oversimplified solutions, where brands take a one-size-fits-all approach to inclusivity.
It sounds like it's about being intentional about inclusivity, involving marginalized communities in the design process from the very beginning to make sure their needs are truly met.
Exactly.
The final scenario is regenerative retail. This is where retail spaces are designed to foster community creativity and sustainability.
It's about transforming retail from just a place to buy things into a dynamic and multifaceted hub.
Who are the people driving this shift?
You have the permaculture enthusiasts. They're inspired by natural systems and principles of regeneration. Then there are the zero-waste communities. They're committed to minimizing waste. And the urban greeners. They want to integrate nature into urban environments. They all share this vision of retail spaces that incorporate renewable energy, circular economy principles, and community initiatives.
What are some of the factors that are contributing to this movement?
There's a growing awareness of the environmental impact of traditional retail. There's a desire for community-driven spaces. And people are recognizing that businesses can play a positive role in addressing social and environmental challenges.
Can you give some examples of this in action?
Lush Cosmetics has their naked stores. They offer a zero-waste shopping experience where products are sold without packaging. Whole Foods Market has their Code Green program. It focuses on waste reduction and community partnerships. And Unpackaged, a grocery store in London, is completely dedicated to zero-waste shopping. Customers bring their own containers.
These are great examples of brands and businesses rethinking their impact on the environment and their communities.
But the report does point out the challenge of high costs associated with these regenerative systems.
It makes sense. Making sure these practices are accessible to businesses of all sizes will be key to seeing them adopted more widely.
Definitely. It's pretty fascinating to consider how these scenarios might play out in real life. They highlight distinct trends, but they're also interconnected in a way. It makes you wonder how they might work in different contexts, and even how they might intersect to shape the future of design and culture.
It does make you think. Could you see regenerative retail and inclusive and accessible principles coming together to create spaces that are sustainable and equitable at the same time?
Absolutely, I can see that happening. Picture a retail space running on renewable energy, embracing those circular economy principles, and designed with universal accessibility in mind. It would be this welcoming and engaging space for everyone, regardless of their abilities.
That's a very holistic and forward-thinking approach. It seems to fit right in with that growing expectation for businesses to step up and be more responsible socially and environmentally.
Okay.
Consumers are really making choices based on their values these days.
No doubt about it. Now let's bring this back to events like ComplexCon. How might these scenarios change things up or even transform those kinds of events altogether?
Well, as it stands, ComplexCon seems to embody a lot of what these scenarios are pushing back against. The focus on exclusivity and celebrity-driven trends. It plays right into that duality of spectacle we were talking about earlier.
It does. It creates that sense of urgency and scarcity. It
Yeah.
almost pushes people to make impulsive purchases without really stopping to think about the long-term value or the impact of what they're buying.
It's interesting to think, what if you took that meaningful engagement scenario and applied it to ComplexCon? How would it change the experience?
Imagine, instead of just having booths selling merchandise, you have interactive installations that let people engage with the creative process firsthand. They could learn about the stories behind the brands and connect with each other in a more meaningful way.
It shifts the focus away from just acquiring things. It becomes a richer, more participatory experience, something that resonates on a deeper level.
Exactly. What if they integrated sustainable scarcity principles? You could have limited edition items made from upcycled or sustainably sourced materials, or workshops on upcycling and customization, where people could create something unique and sustainable themselves.
It's a way to raise awareness about sustainability, and it encourages people to think differently about what they consume.
Now, picture applying customization as standard to ComplexCon. You could have dedicated spaces where people can personalize the things they buy, add unique touches, or even co-create designs with the brands. It empowers the attendees and makes the whole experience more personal.
It's a shift from being a passive consumer to being an active participant, someone who's actually co-creating the experience.
Right. Let's think about the decentralized and localized trends. Scenario ComplexCon could partner with local artists and creators, showcase the host city's unique style and culture, give emerging voices a platform, and connect with the local community in a deeper way.
It would give the event a much stronger sense of place and authenticity. It would feel more relevant to the local community, like a true celebration of its unique identity.
What if they made ethical and transparent practices a priority? They could partner with brands that are committed to fair labor, sustainable sourcing, and transparent supply chains. Attendees would have access to information about the ethical and environmental impact of the products they're buying.
It sends a clear message that ethical considerations are a vital part of fashion and design.
And what if they embraced virtual integration? They could create a hybrid experience with both in-person and virtual components, offer exclusive digital content and experiences for people who can't attend in person. That way, they could expand the reach and accessibility of the event.
It becomes a more inclusive experience. It allows a wider audience to engage with the content and the community.
Imagine ComplexCon going all in on the anti-hype and cultural integrity scenario. Instead of exclusivity and scarcity, the event celebrates timeless designs, craftsmanship, and authentic storytelling.
That would be a bold move. It could be very refreshing and inspiring. It would offer a totally different perspective on value and desirability.
Yeah. Let's look at how they could incorporate the inclusive and accessible scenario. The whole event could be designed with universal accessibility in mind. It would ensure that everyone, regardless of ability, can easily navigate and enjoy the space. They could offer tiered ticketing options and resources specifically for attendees with disabilities. It would make the event more affordable and accessible to a wider range of people.
It's about actively creating an environment that's welcoming and inclusive for everyone.
And finally, envision ComplexCon embracing the regenerative retail model completely. The event could be designed to be zero waste or even carbon positive. They could use sustainable materials, renewable energy, and minimize waste through a closed-loop system.
It would be a powerful statement. A large-scale event that's commercially successful and environmentally responsible, setting a new standard for sustainability in that space.
It's pretty exciting to think about how these scenarios could change the game for ComplexCon and other similar events. They could become experiences that are more meaningful, sustainable, and inclusive.
It shows that even events that are deeply rooted in hype culture can adapt and evolve. They can reflect changing values and priorities.
At the end of the day, it's a challenge to all of us. We need to think critically about how we can shape the future of design and culture, align it with our goals for a more sustainable, equitable, and fulfilling world.
These scenarios give us a lot to think about. Which one resonates most with you? And how do you see these trends playing out in your own life? Share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. Sounds like you're really drawn to a future where design and culture go hand in hand with sustainability, inclusivity, and meaning. Those seem to be the themes that are hitting home as we explore these scenarios.
It is encouraging to see those values taking root in the wider culture. Consumers are definitely becoming more discerning. They're demanding more from the brands and experiences they choose to engage with.
It feels like we're at a turning point, a real opportunity to shape a future that reflects our hopes for a better world.
That's what makes these scenarios so powerful. They're not just predictions, they're invitations to imagine and create something new.
So we're not sitting back and waiting to see what happens. We're actively taking part in shaping the future.
Exactly. You can start by asking yourself, which scenario speaks to you the most? What kind of world do you want to live in? What choices can you make today to support the trends you'd like to see take hold?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
They make you stop and think about your own actions. But it's not just about individual choices, is it? We can also come together as communities to advocate for policies and practices that align with those values.
Absolutely. Collective action is crucial if we want to create real systemic change.
As we wrap up our deep dive into post-hype design futures, I'm left with a sense of hope and a sense of responsibility. Hope because there are so many people and organizations working towards a better future. And responsibility because each of us has a role to play in making that future a reality.
I couldn't agree more. This exploration of possibilities has been both inspiring and thought-provoking.
We've covered a lot of ground. The duality of spectacle, those 10 scenarios. But there's one aspect we haven't explicitly touched on, the role of technology in shaping the future of design and culture.
That's a great point. Technology is a powerful tool. It can amplify existing inequalities, or it can help create a more equitable world. It can fuel overconsumption, or it can drive sustainable practices. How technology shapes the future really comes down to the choices we make and the values we prioritize.
It's about using technology with intention and thought to create the world we want to see, not just demonizing it or blindly embracing it.
Exactly. It's both a challenge and an opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been great to hear your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, challenge your own assumptions, and get involved in creating a future that's more meaningful, sustainable, and inclusive.